Hello, shalom, my friends, shalom, my enemies. This is your old pal, Rabbi Sol Solomon, founder and spiritual leader of Temple Sons of Bitches in Great Neck, New York. And you know, of course, that I love the theater. And you know that perhaps being Jewish and conservative and scared of everything, that, sex and drugs and rock and roll I like, but the other things I kind of stay away from. But sometimes people delve into those, both in real life and also in their art. With us is an artistic fella named Ned Van Zandt. Now, Ned has lived the life, but he's also writing the life. He's got a play called Valle that is going to be done at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in August. We'll give you the details on that. Plus, the hope is to bring it into New York thereafter. So Ned is going to tell us about the play, also about his life, also about his relative, which is kind of an interesting thing too. All of this right now. Shalom, Ned!
Oh, shalom. Nice to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi Sol Solomon.
You're most welcome, and you're looking great and good, considering the fact that you almost at one point, you weren't living on the streets, but considering that you were in somewhat transient conditions and living quite literally at the Chelsea Hotel when it wasn't like $600 a night for tourists, but it was the
Yeah,
Chelsea Hotel.
$900 a night now. It's insane. Yes.
So you were there when?
I was there. I moved in the last week of August in 1978, and I lived there. I moved out right after Nancy Spongeon's murder for about a month, but I lived there until 1981. So I lived there almost 30 years. Yeah.
So what possessed you to go and live there as opposed to another, I wouldn't say flop house, but another cheap hotel or getting a cheap ass apartment or going to Brooklyn or something?
Well, absolutely. Well, I moved to New York when I was 18 and went to NYU and uh, wanted to be an actor. And right away, I had some success and I got a job in Los Angeles playing a teenage alcoholic on The Young and the Restless. Um, and so I started getting some work. And the summer of 1978, my agent wanted me to go to San Francisco and, as I say in the play, to work on my chops and do Commedia dell'arte with Harry Hamlin at the Renaissance Fair.
All right, it's a gig.
Yeah, it's a gig, and Harry Hamlin was just coming up. He was at American Conservatory Theater, and he was, the featured actor in most of their plays. Anyway, I did that gig that summer, and while I was up there, I met a bunch of interesting characters, including Alejandro Escovedo, the musician,
Yes.
who is still remains one of my good friends. Anyway, a group of young kids, we were all in our early 20s. We all decided that we were going to move to the Chelsea Hotel. And because that seemed to be the zeitgeist, and that's where it was happening. Now, there were sex and drugs happening, and that was part of the scene. And so it was kind of, I don't know if Alejandro was the leader, but there were about 6 or 8 of us from San Francisco that moved to New York, and we moved to the Chelsea. I knew about the Chelsea. I had been there before. I'd lived in New York. Um,
You heard
but
the Leonard Cohen song,
yeah,
and you were hoping to find your
I
own
knew
Janis
about
Joplin.
Patti
Yes.
Smith and Janis Joplin and the Stones had been there, but I wasn't expecting what I found. It was really, as I like to say, it was like Disneyland for sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah.
And so I moved in there, and I am at the time I'd gone to prep school. My uniform was like a tweed jacket, wire rim glasses,
And,
and
and I'm sorry, I do want to stop you for a moment, since you mentioned the alma mater of the host of this program, NYU. What did you study there? Were you in the NYU acting program?
yeah, I was with the acting program, and Olympia Dukakis was my acting teacher.
Oh, what is the most interesting or profound thing you learned, if anything, from her or from one of your teachers there?
Well, as she liked to say to me, she gave me some criticism after I did a scene, and she said, "Chutzpah, chutzpah." I did not know what that meant, you know. And she said,
Amazing. She knew what
"Balls,
it is. She's Greek. Okay, yeah.
balls, balls." So
Mm.
she taught me the meaning of chutzpah, and she basically just, helped me get out of my own way. And I mean, I've got some really uh, dirty stories too. I mean,
Yes, yes, please tell what. I'll hold my ears. You just talk to the audience. Go ahead.
well, no, we had a young girl that was in class who had actually been a stewardess before she came to study acting in our class. And Olympia was just trying to break her down because she was so well manicured and coiffed and the girl was saying, Olympia, you keep talking about, our center, it comes from our center. And I don't really know, what that is. And Olympia just had it and she said, honey, it comes from the hairs on your cunt. You
Yeah.
asked for it. Anyway, um, you
Good thing
know,
she wasn't a male instructor, or he would have been fired the next
no, no,
day,
no. Well, this
hung
is
up on
all,
charges
it
in
was
the
all very
70s. Yeah.
politically incorrect back then.
Yeah, 60s.
But
So, okay, so you're at the Chelsea Hotel and you're discovering that basically hairs on the cunt is the motto of the entire hotel.
well, absolutely. And I consider myself pretty wild, I mean, I had lived in Los Angeles. My roommate was dating Shaka Khan, and so I'd been around quite a scene, but nothing was preparing me for the Chelsea.
Be specific. Like I assume just people like shooting up in the hallway, but that was New York in the 70s, any street.
Yeah, that was a friend of mine in the East Village used to say speed freaks shooting at each other with guns outside open windows on East First Street. I mean, it was wild. Wasn't quite that way at the Chelsea, but yes, people shooting up in front of open windows. I had not gone there yet. That came, but it was it was exciting. It was dangerous. Met David Bowie in the hotel.
Any stories or just hi? Hello, I'm David
Well,
Bowie. Hi. Yeah.
he had dated a woman that lived there. She was a designer, and I think their relationship was over, but they were friends. And so she stopped by. I mean, he stopped by her apartment, and word went through the hotel, Bowie's here. And so I went to the door, knocked on the door, and went in and met him. And so that was exciting. Keith Richards, Iggy Pop, Richard Gere, Charles James, the fashion designer, Steve Baders from the Dead Boys. He and I were friends. In fact, that whole group of us that I was hanging out with, two of the people that had come from San Francisco with Alejandro and I were these characters named David and Raymond. And David was president and Raymond was vice president of the Iggy Pop fan club. And uh, and so they were close to Iggy, and that's how I met Iggy. I'd actually met Iggy like 6 months earlier in Los Angeles when he came home from a fashion photo shoot with my then girlfriend, Nina. I was dating this Bulgarian supermodel, and
Haven't we all? Haven't we? Well, the president has, but okay, yeah. So
yeah,
yeah. So
and
she dumped you for Iggy. Okay.
so I had met Iggy, and so anyway, just all everything.
Didn't you say to Iggy, I was dating her? Did you have any grudge?
Not at all, because I was trying to extricate myself from the relationship. And so I actually I acquiesced and said, please have fun with
You
Nina.
moved up to a Romanian supermodel,
Right.
building ultimately to a Spanish supermodel. That's yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But anyway, so it was wild. Meanwhile, I'm an actor, so I'm supposed to be acting and so had some auditions and I pretended that, but the party kind of took over and the party scene and culminating with the night of Nancy Spungen murder in room 100 and
Well,
I
wait,
was
it
there.
wasn't her. She murdered him. She died
No.
later. No, no, wait,
No,
no.
no, he died later. She was found dead on the bathroom floor on the morning of October 12th. He woke up and didn't know what had happened, and but was arrested for the murder. And a group of us think that he was not the murderer. And so I delve into that in my play. And
So your
there's all
play
kinds
is
of
is really autobiographical. It's basically your
totally.
story.
It's my story, and it ends because it's not just that. I mean, the Chelsea is the selling point because that's, in fact, when all that was happening, I was thinking, I should write about this someday, and I did, and I wrote about it in the mid '90s. There was a wonderful writer from Louisiana who was in LA named Sarah Thayer. And she was on the show Strangers with Candy with Amy Sedaris, and she was part of a group. Anyway, she had a zine. Remember zines?
Yeah.
And she had a zine, and she asked me to write something. And so I wrote this, basically one-page short story called 1978, and it was about that night. And some people read it and said, you really should write about this. I've got to say, the reason I really didn't pursue it was because the person that I think might have been the murderer was still alive. And I was fearful of this person. They have since died. And
Ah, hooray. Yeah.
and so what happened was about 10 years ago, I moved back to New York from Los Angeles. Um, the thrust of my play, I must say, is about when I got arrested and put in jail in Austin, Texas, in 2006, and spent about 5 months in jail. And that's really the thrust of the play, because I got to jail, and when I got there, I was recognized by the head of the Texas Aryan Brotherhood in cell block B.
Wait, this is getting so. How do we get from the Chelsea Hotel with the most left wing fucked up people ever, and now you have the most right wing fucked up people ever? I
Right,
mean, why
right.
would the head of the Aryan Brotherhood recognize you?
Well, because his favorite soap opera was One Life to Live,
Oh,
which
it
I
makes
used to be
sense.
on. I used to
Fantastic.
have recurring roles on One Life to Live, and this guy was obsessed with soap operas, as a lot of people in jail were. Their soap operas aren't so much, in the culture these days, but he watched All My Children, The Bold and the Beautiful, Young and the Restless, One Life to Live. And I was on most of those, but especially One Life to Live and All My Children, because as a New York actor, most New York actors, especially during the 90s, that was bread and butter. I did a lot of roles, and
So,
you
pardon me
could
for
play.
asking
Yeah.
also, though, why all the way in 2006, after the 1970s had the years of you know what, and rock and roll, why did you get arrested? What the hell did you do in
Because
Texas?
I had been after the Chelsea, and I drove a cab in New York for about 3 years, and that ended badly.
Wait,
And
how did it end badly?
I picked up a guy on the Upper West Side, and he told me he would pay me when we got to Ninth Street
Oh,
and Avenue B. And Ninth Street and Avenue B in the early 80s was a war zone. And I knew this. And so when we got there, he said, hey, would you like to come up to my apartment and do some coke? And I was like, okay, like an idiot. And when I got in this abandoned tenement, he pulled out the biggest knife I'd ever seen. It was like a machete, and he tried to slit my throat, was not able to, but he got my money. Anyway, that was scary. And the
yeah, yeah.
following day, I quit driving a cab. Anyway, so I was struggling with, um,
Paying rent and
addiction. And so I
yeah.
did get sober, and I was sober for many years. And then I drank. And so, and then, it was a downward slide. Ended up back in Austin, Texas. I'm from Texas, from a storied family. I'm like seventh generation Texan. My second
Oh,
cousin,
we'll talk about that. Yes, yes.
Towns Van Zandt. Anyway, so I was, on the skids and got arrested, which was the worst thing that ever happened to me and the best thing that ever happened to me in 2006. So I get to jail, and
Were you driving? I mean, or just publicly intoxicated or what?
when I got arrested,
Yeah. What were you doing? Yeah.
I was leaving a friend's meth lab, basically outside Austin, Texas, and got arrested with,
Oh,
and that was not my drug of choice.
wow.
Um,
Okay. Got it.
but
Yeah.
anyway,
I'm just filling in the little gaps here,
I
which I'm
got
sure you do in your
arrested.
play.
I got
Yeah.
arrested, and I was, my life was the dregs at the time, and so, like I say, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But when I got to jail, here I was. I became like a celebrity, and was
Because
able
this guy who was
because
he like 300 pounds and Nazi
oh, no, no,
swastikas?
no. He was like an albino god. I mean, he was very good looking, and but with tattoos everywhere, and almost white hair, and steel blue eyes, and but basically he wants to be an actor. And so we are able to watch television when they let you out of your cell. There's like this open cell time, and there are four TVs, and one is the Cartoon Network, and the other is ESPN, and the other is the Murder Channel, Crime Channel, Dateline,
Really? Okay, yeah.
and then network television. And I became like the programmer at night. I would make requests like this show's on. The show Lost, the series Lost, was in its ending its first season, and that is a theme of my play too. Anyway, so we would watch Lost, and I would transcribe scenes, and I would do little acting scenes with this character Donnie, who is the junior Grand Dragon of the Texas Aryan Brotherhood. Anyway, so that's part of the play, and then I flash back to the Chelsea Hotel.
Now, how long were you in prison?
Almost 5 months.
Oh, I mean, yeah, so not
It
even
was
that
long
day.
enough to it was, yeah, nobody would bail me out. I, exhausted all. Anyway,
And then you come out, and what do you have? I mean, at that point, are you immediately sober?
no, I go to treatment. I go to a treatment. I somehow managed to get to Hawaii, which is the theme of my play. And so I went to a treatment center in Hawaii and then moved into a sober house and, did the deal, 12-step groups, that kind of thing. And did the right things, which I hadn't done the first time I got sober. And for me anyway. But my story is it's not sentimental or preachy or all about that. Um, but it is in my life today, I am partner in a sober house on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and I run a sober house for men. I mean, our demographic is 18 to 35, but it's people with mental health issues and addiction issues, and so I'm passionate about that work, but I'm also an actor. I played
So
Rudy
you've been
Giuliani.
making, how have you been since like 2006?
Yeah.
Have you been able to sustain yourself as an actor, or do you do other gig, or what? How do
Yeah,
you? Yeah.
I some years, yes. I've had some good years and some lean years. And the business right now is pretty terrible uh, across the board in terms of television and
Even it's
film.
5 years after COVID. Why is it still bad?
Uh, the strike did not help. I mean, didn't help from my perspective. I'll probably get in trouble for saying that. But uh, you know, one of the reasons I moved back to New York is because there's more episodic television for character actors, and so because after I got out of treatment and I lived in Hawaii for a couple of years, I was a big fish in a small pond. I was getting great parts. They were doing a lot of filming in Hawaii. I mean, that's an example of the industry right now. Used to be there were five, on average, 4 or 5 series filming in Hawaii because you've got the military there, you've got tourism. I mean, there's a reason, the networks put money into shows in Hawaii and we'll set them there. There's nothing filming there now. I mean, it's terrible. They've lost their tax breaks but at the time when I got sober in 2007, I started getting work there, and I thought, why move back to LA? And
Yeah, why leave paradise for mini paradise? Yeah, got it.
exactly. And so I did that, but I was ambitious, and so after 3 years in Hawaii, I moved back to LA. Struggled there. I got there, and it was like they said, Ned, who? I didn't have an agent. I didn't. And I got some gigs. I worked, but my heart was getting back to New York, and I knew I wanted to write. I didn't know what it was. I thought it might be a memoir, and I actually started writing Del Valle as a play. There is a group in New York called Naked Angels, which is a cold reading series, which is every Tuesday night in September till May. They're off for the summer, but you bring in pages you've written, and it's for actors and writers, and it's free, and it's usually at a downtown theater. It was started in the early '90s by a bunch of New York actors like Marissa Tomei, Sarah Jessica Parker, Matthew Broderick, all these Cynthia Nixon, all these actors and movers and shakers in New York theater started this group as a way to, at the time, the first Gulf War was happening, and they wanted to express themselves. And I'd known about the group, and so when I moved back to New York in 2012, I started going there, and I brought in some pages for what was going to be my play, and I wrote like 5 characters, and I was looking for actors, And that particular night, there weren't the actors to choose from. So I read all the roles. And then I thought, well, this will be easy. This is doing, I won't need this and I can get this going. Well, anyway, it took me about 2 years to finish the play and get it where I wanted. And then I did workshops at the Atlantic Theater. I workshops in London and LA. And so it's had
I'm going to stop you there because this
okay.
is a thing that the host of the show, Dave, thinks about all the time. It's like, oh, you got a workshop at the Atlantic. You got a work. Is it like you, you resent or does it frustrate you that so much of this is workshop hell? Oh, they're going to read my play. And if it comes out pretty well, they'll give me a thing in 8 months. They'll say, you finish it, it's good, we'll produce it. And it doesn't fucking happen. I mean, how do you just go from reading to workshop to this to like, oh, we're going to open the door a crack. You're going to let your foot in and then we're going to close the door.
It ain't easy. I got to tell you, in January of 2020, it looked like I had a production off Broadway. We did a reading at the Cherry Lane. It was all moving that way, and then
Well,
COVID. Yeah,
that was even a special circumstance, but
yeah.
just
Oh
in
no, it's
regular terms,
it,
everything is like, come, we have workshops, we've got readings, we got and then it's just that's all
yeah.
it
Well,
is.
it's why I used to drink. It's that frustration.
Oh,
These days, hopefully, I have tools to deal with the disappointment and the resentments. But you just keep doing it. I just keep going. I haven't given up. And here's what happened was in 2015, which was a good year for me. I got a recurring role on The Blacklist, the TV show with James Spader on NBC. And I was a character named Leonard Call. And still, if I'm ever recognized, which is not that much, but people say, "Oh, I saw you on that show," and it was at its peak, seasons 2 and 3, and I met Amir Aronson, who was a series regular on The Blacklist. He played a character named Aram, and wonderful. And I actually seen him off Broadway at the Labyrinth Theater. I can't remember the name of the play, but another friend of mine who's a comedian named Bill Dawes. He and Bill Dawes. I'd gone to see Bill and met Amir. Well, I end up on the Blacklist, and we're hanging out, and I start telling, and I just finished writing Del Valle, and I started telling him about it, and he said, "I want to direct this." I did it. I read it for him in my apartment, and so that's where our relationship began. And it about 2 years, he starred in The Kite Runner on Broadway, and he was magnificent. And I went to see it, and he said, "What's happening with Del Valle?" Well, this is coming out of COVID and everything else. And I said, "Nothing." And he said, "Why don't we go do a workshop up in Saratoga Springs for a company called the Orchard Project?" And 2 years ago, we did that. And so it's been, and
And
then,
this even though it's 2 years later, this is still sort of an orchard project thing
yes,
that you're doing at
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
Edinburgh Fringe in
Yeah,
August.
yeah, because a year after, well, actually 6 months after that first Orchard Project workshop, we did an industry reading Midtown at a little theater on 45th Street and invited some industry people, and that's where the producer Craig Balsam came on board. And Craig's amazing. He just won a Tony for Sunset Boulevard, The Revival, and the show Dead Outlaw, which just closed.
Yeah.
Uh, and in fact, a musician from Dead Outlaw is part of Del Valle now, who is doing music for it, and that's amazing. So it takes a long time, and so Edinburgh's the next
And the next,
stop
by the
on
way,
the.
you talked about Broadway that Amir, your director,
Yeah,
was on Broadway. You were on Broadway in one particular show. I do want to hear if you have any stories about this because you were in a revival of the Eugene O'Neill play. It wasn't long. It was Iceman Cometh,
yep,
which starred Kevin Spacey as well as Paul Giamatti and
yep.
Tony Danza was in there. Like, quite a few people were in there. Tell me some stories.
Well, it was amazing. I was hired. I'd never understudied before, and I covered three roles. I had a part and it's a 4 hour long play. And I played the cop who, at the end of the play, comes and arrests Kevin Spacey's character because he's murdered his wife. And so I did
Oh, you
that.
gave it. Now anybody who wants to see the Iceman cometh, you
Down the
just
note.
spoiled it.
I
You
just
just come. You wait 3.5 hours to. Oh, he did it. Oh, yeah. God damn it. All right, but anyway,
yeah.
yeah,
Anyway, so I played that character, but I also was understudying Paul Giamatti and a wonderful actor named Steven Singer and the other cop that I was with. And so I actually never went on for any of they never, Paul, I was hoping Paul didn't want him to get sick, but I wanted him to give me some performances, but he did not. But it was the most amazing theatrical experience ever. Howard Davies, brilliant British director, directed it. It was a production that had originated in London at the Almeida and had transferred to the West End and then came to New York with six of the British actors, and then they recast the rest in New York. And Kevin Spacey, I mean, I've got stories about him, but he was amazing. He was generous. He was one of the
I'm
producers.
saying you can't just say I've got stories about him. Tell me one. It can be good or bad. It doesn't have to be that he was
Well, okay,
touching
okay.
a
Well,
15 year
here's
old.
the
No.
story. So
Yeah.
when we were, because it was such a expensive production, 4 hours long, so you're paying, the crew overtime,
Yeah.
and everybody was making scale, which was for me, I think it was 1,600 a week or something. For me, that was a lot of money.
Sure.
For Tony Danza, maybe not so much, but we opened and we were a huge hit, and the run was sold out. And Kevin Spacey tripled our salaries. And I mean,
What do you mean? From his own paycheck? What do you mean, or from his
yeah, well, he
movie
was one
money?
of the producers, and so
Oh.
yeah, from his own nut, I guess, his profits. He tripled our salaries. I mean, he would give us gifts. I mean, he was terrific. And as an actor, I just marveled at him. I used to go in and go to rehearsals on days I wasn't called, just to watch him and Howard Davies work, and it was magnificent. But I will tell you a story. So Kevin Spacey was good friends with Bill Clinton, who was president at the time and who had
Okay.
just been impeached. And so we were going to have a benefit for the DNC or something, and this was in June of 1999, and like he'd just been impeached, and Hillary had just decided to run for the Senate in New York, and the Secret Service were like everywhere. I think they even came to my Greenwich Village apartment, just to scope everything out when President visits
Sure.
a Broadway house. Anyway, what happened was on the night that Clinton came, I don't think the White House had read the play because it's about a man that murders his wife because she finds out he's being unfaithful. And so, I mean, this is just my supposition because Hillary did not show. I guess she had a political thing or something, so she didn't show. But what happened was I had the sidekick, the other actor who played the other cop. We're a tag team. We come in and we handcuff Spacey's character with antique handcuffs, and then I have a speech or something, and I take him away. Well, the other young actor who was with me, he had this habit. It used to drive me crazy. He had this habit of showing up right before entrance. I would get, I'm a professional. I'd get to, you know, the wings 5 minutes at least. I just be on time. Plus, we're dealing with props, you
Mhm.
know.
Right.
Uh,
Well, no, wait, was he late for a call, or was he just hanging out backstage and
he
then
was
would
just
get to the
hanging out
curtain?
and we just saunter on right when we enter. It always made me nervous. And like the stage managers in the wings or whatever. Well, because the Secret Service were there, because Clinton was there, this actor had gone out in the alley for his usual smoke break, and the doors were locked, and he couldn't get in. And so the stage manager's saying, "Where is he?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And then he goes, "You're on." And so I had to go out and play both characters, read say his lines and my lines. And his character, he's younger and beefier, and he's the one that actually grapples with Spacey and arrests him. with these antique handcuffs. And I had to do that. So basically, I had to like be in two places at once. And the look on Kevin Spacey's eyes of terror as I'm doing all this, I'll never forget. And but I managed to, and everybody's just like, anyway, I
Do
did
you think
it.
the audience had any, other than O'Neill
I don't,
fanatics who knew the
I
play?
don't think, I don't think
Yeah.
they did. I don't think they did. And at the curtain call, Spacey, to his credit, took his bow, and then he pointed to me, and I took a bow. So they don't. Anyway,
They should
that
have
was,
pointed to, and then point to you again for a second bow.
yeah,
Or,
yeah.
or actually, I guess, did the actor ever come out from the locked play? I mean, he could have
No, no,
gone for
no,
the
no.
phone,
He
but
was devastated.
yeah,
Of course. I mean, it's
yeah.
it's terrible. Yeah.
Ah,
Um,
cool
but anyway,
story.
but anyway,
Speaking of theater stories with Ned Van Zant, do you have memories? You weren't really there for the off-off-Broadway movement of the 1960s of La Mama and 13th Street Theater, or were you? Or Theater
I
for New
was I
City?
was at the tail end of that. Like I said, I got to New York in 1972, and so La Mama was there. I worked at La Mama. The old WPA theater was there. The old Reliable and the Chino, which were the
Yeah.
birthplaces of off Broadway, they were gone. But I was there, and Phoebe's, the bar on Fourth Street in the Bowery, which is like the Sardi's of off Broadway. It used to be. Now it's a sports bar, but yeah, no, I was able to lap that up, and I was, Charles Ludlam, John Vaccaro, Jeff Weiss. These were people I marveled at.
I'm just kind of personal. Do you happen to remember or know a playwright there named Bob Reinhold? Does that name ring a bell? He used
No,
to write sometimes poetically myth-related plays that were done a lot at La Mama and places like.
Yeah,
Does it
Reinhold.
ring a bell? Bob Reinhold?
No.
All right. Did you know Langford Wilson
Oh,
then or
yes.
Sam
Yes.
Shepard then?
Yes. I knew Sam Shepard. I knew Lanford Wilson. William Hoffman, who I dedicate my play to, who wrote the play As Is, and also was librettist for operas and wrote The Ghost of Versailles. He was one of my earliest mentors and friends. And so I knew Lanford. I knew Tom Ian, who wrote Dreamgirls. In fact, I just came across a picture of me and Nina, the girlfriend. We were in the first HBO movie, which was in 1980, and it was a filmed version of The Dirtiest Show in Town, which had been an off Broadway hit and off Broadway hit. And who else? Sam Shepard, playwright named Joseph Renard, Janine O'Reilly, John Vaccaro. Uh,
Rochelle Owens maybe or who else was out there? But Fornez, Maria Rena Fornez.
oh yeah, yeah, Maria Irene Fornez, Julie Bavasso.
Did
Yeah,
you any stories of these people? Any Wilson, any Shepard stories, any Ludlam stories for gosh sakes?
no, well, I mean, Ellen Stewart's story, who was La Mama herself. I mean, she was tough, but in I guess 1974, I went with a troupe. Oh, Robert Patrick, who's another playwright who wrote Kennedy's Children. That was his hit.
He was
Well,
on this program, by the way, before he died.
oh
After
no
it was very
way.
difficult, but he
Well,
was a guest.
Robert was, yeah. I mean, I have a million Robert Patrick stories, but I mean, he was a mentor and a friend, and he drove me crazy. But he was one of my closest friends. But he got the keys from Ellen to go to LA and start a La Mama Hollywood. And I was in the original troupe and I was his muse. He wrote plays for me.
Mm.
And it was difficult relationship because it was unrequited love.
Uh,
I wouldn't be his boyfriend, but we remained friends. And we had a grand opening in Los Angeles. The Mark Taper Forum, the Center Theater Group, Gordon Davidson, gave us a theater for our opening because the theater we were going to open in flooded. And so he gave us the Pilgrimage Theater, which is a great, it's like an Art Deco structure by the Hollywood Theater, and it was owned by the Mark Taper Forum. And we had our opening there. Ellen flew out for the opening, and one of the benefactors, one of the wealthy people who were giving us money, said they would put her up. Well, it turned out they, I guess, were racist and didn't know that Ellen was black. And they put her in the guest house, and the guest house had bats. And I mean, it was just terrible. And Ellen is calling us saying, I cannot do this. I said, well, we got to get you a hotel. But her solution was whenever Ellen needed money for the theater or had a situation, she would take to her bed, and get ill and vapors. Anyway, so that's what happened. She ended up in the hospital. We don't think it was real, but she certainly got a lot of sympathy, and it was great. And so she was not at the opening night to ring the bell, but we went to her hospital room and performed the play for her. But anyway,
those were the days.
those were the
Not
days.
that I agree with the shit she was pulling with
Yeah,
that, but the others, all the others are going to the hospital, doing this and ringing
yeah,
that. It just miss that. Do you
yeah.
miss
Oh,
that?
I miss.
Yeah.
I miss Off-Off-Broadway. I mean, it was amazing. It was.
Now, well, we have a couple more minutes to talk here with Ned Van Zandt. Don't forget his play Del Valle is playing at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival from August 6th to August 25th. You can catch it. It's part of the Underbelly. That's that theater that they, one of the main stage theaters that they have there in the Dairy Room. Notice how I'm milking this.
Yeah.
Get milk. Okay, so it's at the Dairy Room. It's called Del Valle. This I do not understand. It's Delvalle, which should be pronounced Del Valle, but no, it's Del Valle because
Oh,
it's
it's Del
Texas.
Valley because it's Texas. Yeah.
So, but speaking of Texas, and you mentioned that your family has roots in Texas. First of all, your family helped co-found, what was it, Fort Worth?
Fort Worth. My great grandfather was one of the founders of Fort Worth, Texas. He came there in the 1830s from Tennessee, and he was civic minded. He started. I mean, he didn't. I don't know if he brought the railroad there, but he started the first bank, and he was, he was quite an accomplished guy. And my grandfather, I don't have much memory of because he died when I was a baby. But my father was a writer. My father did not like being the son of prominent people. Now, there wasn't a lot of money. I mean, we were upper middle class, but my great grandfather, the one that founded Fort Worth, I think he died right at the Depression. He did not believe in inherited wealth. And so before he died, he bequeathed all the land we owned, which is most of downtown Fort Worth, to the city of Fort Worth. And I curse him every day for that. But but it gave Fort Worth culture because the Kimball Museum, world-class art museums, are on that land because what he said was this land has to be used for civic good. And so
Yeah, but it could have been Ned's Theater Museum. Could have been.
could have been, no, it
Could
could have
have
been,
been. Now,
yeah,
speaking also of your family, so your second cousin of the late great, as they say, Townes Van Zandt, the country folk singer, songwriter. Let me actually before we even get to any Townes stuff, this is so weird because just a couple of months ago on this program we interviewed a comedy actor and playwright named Billy Van Zandt,
I
who
know, yeah, yeah,
who his brother, his half brother,
it's
is
Steve.
Stephen Van Zandt, another musician.
Yeah.
But you no relation to those Van
I have
Zandts.
met Billy, and we think we are distantly related. Because the Van Sant, they all came from Germany or Holland, and so it's possible because Billy, is in Hollywood, and in the '90s, he was producing some TV show
Right.
which I auditioned for, and so we thought, it's possible.
Now,
Um,
what about Towns though? Did you know Towns?
Oh, yes, I knew Towns. Towns was my second cousin, and he was the black sheep of the family. And I'd known about him even before I knew him. But at a young age, I had been at family events where he was. Now, in the '70s, in Austin, I met up with him and partied with him and hung out with him. And actually, it's kind of a poignant story because in the early 1980s, after the Chelsea Hotel, well, I'm back in Texas and I'm living in hotels and motels in Dallas, Fort Worth, and I'm struggling. And I get a phone call, and it's Towns. And I said, how did you get my number? And he goes, your mother gave it to me. He said, I'm in LA. I've got a show tonight at the Whiskey or someplace, the Roxy. And I was calling to see if you wanted to come. But she said, you're not doing so well. You're in Texas. Anyway, he was basically trying to 12 step me. At
He
the
was trying to 12-step you.
Yeah, which was
There's a
amazing
switch. Yeah.
because he did get sober for a while. He went to treatment and he but it never stuck. But anyway, but it was kind of like it was very odd. But I enjoyed Towns. I hung out with him. My nephew is like best friends with Towns' son. But I never appreciated his genius until after he was gone, and when I really started getting into his music. The last time I saw him was at there's a club in Austin called La Zona Rosa, and it was in the mid '90s, and I went to see him, and he was in terrible shape. Couldn't finish the show, and so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
tragic, but
That should serve as an object lesson for you every time you start thinking about, hey, maybe I'll have one, I'll do once I'll marijuana cigarette, and then you see
right.
what happens very, very quickly, as they say. But we're not going to let this happen to you because we
Hope
need you
not.
on the stage. My last question for Ned Van Zant is: you've been working on Del Valle for more than a decade at this point, really, and
Yep.
the latest version was like 2015 and 18. What else, literarily as opposed to acting, might be in the fire? Are you writing any other plays? Are you doing any other performances?
Not yet. I have. Do you remember the actress Doris Roberts? She was the
Sure.
mom on
Yeah.
Everybody Loves Raymond. Well, she was like my surrogate mother, and that's a whole story. And so I have started writing a bit about, she passed away in 2016, and I have some great. So I have some ideas. I'm thinking of.
Well, come on, tell us a Doris Roberts story. Come on,
Oh my God. Okay. In 2009, I was living in Hawaii and I'd flown to New York to see her. She, when I disappeared in 2000 and went back to Austin where I had a house, and I just dropped out, and everybody was worried about me, including Doris. This is before Facebook, but she did get on Craigslist somehow and says, "Has anybody seen Ned?" Because I had parked my car in her driveway in Los Angeles. Because when I would go to New York, I had an apartment in West Hollywood, but there was street parking, so I'd always park my car, and I never came back to get it. And my car sat in her driveway for 3 years. And anyway, we finally reconnected in 2008 when our mutual acting teacher, Milton Casellas, passed away. And I went to his memorial at the Directors Guild, and I, when I hadn't contacted her, and I went up to her, and she turned white. She thought I was a ghost. And she said, she was thrilled to see me, but pissed off.
Move your fucking car. I mean,
Well,
yeah.
she said I had it towed after 3 years.
Oh.
But anyway, but she was wonderful. And so, I'm living in Hawaii at the time, and she says, what are you doing in Hawaii?" And I said, "Well, I'm acting, whatever." And she says, "Guest stars?" And I said, "No, they're mostly co-stars." And she says, "You're not a co-star. Get your ass back to LA." And so anyway, she was my biggest cheerleader and fan. And actually, so in 2009, I was in a historical movie called Princess Kailani, which is a beautiful movie with Will Patton, Barry Pepper, and Qorianka Kilcher, who played Pocahontas in the New World, Terrence Malick's movie. Anyway, she played the last princess in Hawaii, and it's a lovely film. It was an independent film, didn't play long, but it played New York, LA. Anyway, the premiere was happening one night, and I'm in New York, and I'm staying at Doris's apartment on Central Park South, and she's on the phone, and we're going to be late. And I said, "Doris, we're going to be late. I want to go to the premiere." And so we go out, and there's no taxis, there's nothing. And then a guy drives by, and he goes, "Marie Barone," and she says, "Give us a ride," and he did. And anyway, so that's how we I've got a million Doris stories. Anyway, but
Stories
there's
are
something
amazing.
there. There's grist for the mill.
Work on it, write it, and again, are we going to be seeing you in anything on screen, small or big? Actually,
I
all
I,
screens are big now,
I
but
would
yeah.
hope so. I was in Feud, the Capote versus the Swans, which was wonderful. It was a bucket list. I got to work with Gus Van Sant. Ryan Murphy produced it, and it's about Truman Capote. And I play Babe Paley's doctor. I'm in 2 episodes of that. I did that last year, working with Naomi Watts and Demi Moore, all these, wonderful actors. And then I'm on Netflix. I play Rudy Giuliani in Painkiller, which is the miniseries about OxyContin.
Yes. Oh my God. We saw. I've got to look for you. I mean, we saw you, and now I want to look for you. Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah.
gosh.
In the last episode, but anyway, there's a whole story about that. But yeah, so I'm auditioning, I'm doing that, but my day job and my passion is I run this sober house, and it's Transcend NYC. Transcend.nyc is the club.
Transcend.nyc
Yeah.
for if you're looking to get off something, or if you're having issues, or you're
Yep.
struggling, contact transcendnyc.com,
Not
right?
NYC. No com.
Oh,
No.
I'm sorry, transcend.nyc.
Transcend.nyc. Yep.
And of course, if you want to find out more about Ned himself, go to nedvanzandt.com. That's with a Z, not like Gus Van Sant, the director, but like
Right.
Towns Van Sant and the other Van Zandt. I can't even keep it. Nedvanzandt.com, and go see Del Valle at the Edinburgh Fringe in the Underbelly, in the Derry. Just ask around. It's at the Fringe. People are handing out flyers.
Different. And there's some wonderful people that are going to be at the Underbelly too. Laura Benanti. You know Laura Benanti? Yeah.
Yeah.
She's got a one-woman show she's doing, and it's at the Underbelly. And then there's this play called Three Chickens. I don't know the full title, but anyway, some friends of mine are in it. Audrey
Okay.
Rappaport.
So are you gonna be there for the full 3 weeks, getting the whole experience?
Yeah, the whole experience. Yeah.
Well, have a wonderful, wonderful time. Do a wonderful, wonderful show, and then bring it back, of course, to a real country like America. Bring it to New York, and we'll see you on the stages. Ned Van Zandt, thank you so much for joining us in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Rabbi Sol Solomon.
Shalom to you.
Shalom.